So this morning I'm going to bring us from that feeling of joy into a place of a bit of sadness and confusion, and then hopefully back, maybe not to joy, but a place of deeper understanding. Many of us have seen the picture, blood-red handprints, small ones, smeared across the wooden doors and concrete bricks of St. Paul's Co-Cathedral in Saskatoon. The red handprints ghoulishly clawing for entry. There are no hands, just the red marks, unable to grasp the handles. The prints frame the words, "We were children." And now the red is spreading around the churches, not just handprints at the base, but leaping around a hot, brittle, fragile structure, a structure that looks to the onlooker as stable and firm, that has stood proud for over 100 years upon its foundation, but now seems foreign and warped. Its foundation was carved out of the soil of others, and onto the proud steeple, matches have been thrown, and the air now in all of Canada is suddenly uncomfortable, hard to breathe. Were these mosques aflame, this week we would have driven north. Our hands would have linked, our arms outstretched in circles of protection and friendship. Were these synagogues, ours this Shabbat, would be enveloped by caring arms, hugging us and our people, and standing symbolic guard against those that hate. But here we stand, each in our own places, on the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, Mississaugas of the Credit, surrounded by their enduring presence. Here we stand. Here we stand reading a Torah portion named after a zealot, willing to kill for his version of purity, and rewarded in our text with a Brit Shalom, a covenant of peace. Here we stand as our children head off, many leaving tomorrow, for interactions more imagined than real with the history of this land, heading to Wahanoan, Winnebago, Tamarack, Tamaqua, Manitou, Erawan. Where is it, really, that we stand? American Jews have a certain messianic image of America, a complicated one, a controversial one which made the tenet of the tenure of the last U.S. president jarring, but one that is nearly as old as Jewish migration to North America. Hear these words as they were first formulated by Isaac Mayer Wise in the 1850s. After many centuries of darkness and ignorance, which benighted the human race, the morning dawned, and rays of learning and humanity dispersed the dense fogs, and the nations revived. Liberty and reform in politics and religion ameliorated the condition of millions of men, but not of Israel. Our tears, our sighs, our grief was not pitied. Our wrongs were not redressed. We remained homeless and friendless strangers everywhere. But finally, the bird found a home and the swallow a nest. North America, he writes. This great and blessed country, which is written with gold letters in the book of Providence, offered a home to every honest man, to every persecuted, proscribed, and afflicted man, Only on these shores the Israelite found a home. For the first time, a home. Joyously we call this land our land, and this people our people. Canada is different. It is not spoken of in these messianic tones in our literature. Many of you know that one of our honorees this morning, John Freund, is well published and has told his story and collected the stories of others from Birkenau and Auschwitz. A recent analysis of the memoirs of the Azrieli Foundation, though it doesn't mention John's spring end by name, points out that in almost all of these memoirs, Canada is just a point of arrival at the end of a long and unimaginable journey. In the author Mia Spiro's words, Canada is a non-place when we read of it in these memoirs. It's funny to think of Canada as a non-place just after we celebrated a non-Canada Day. Canada is a setting that's safe enough where we raise our families. This article is featured in University of Toronto Press's No Better Home, Jews, Canada, and the Sense of Belonging, edited by York University's David S. Kaufman. It discusses the complication of Canadian Jewish experience and provides a few interesting frameworks to the complicated feelings that many of us are having at the old new news of Canada's treatment of the Indigenous peoples of this land. Professor Kaufman tells of how the farm projects, which rescued many of our people from Europe, were planned actions to claim First Nations land. The central insight that arises from this discussion of the Jewish-Indigenous relationship, he writes, is that the Jewish-Canadian past is burdened because the history of multinational mass migration that produced Canada is the history of colonialism. Canadian Jewish history ought to be seen not just as a heroic story of immigrant ascent and accomplishment, but as part of the story of the juggernaut of modernity, colonialism. Within that framework, he crafts this complicated summary. Jews have contributed to Indigenous displacement as they have sought to make Canada their home, and have fought against Indigenous disenfranchisement while seeking to make Canada a better home. From Franz Boas, the father of modern anthropology, to Erwin Cutler, he details how Jewish values have tried to do more and be more in Canada. How Jewish values have helped us fight for our minority rights with their rights. How our values have helped us see our story in theirs. Discursive colonialism, but an attempt to do good. Jews have contributed to Indigenous displacement as they have sought to make Canada their home, and have fought against Indigenous disenfranchisement while seeking to make Canada a better home. This week's Torah portion starts in zealotry and ends with the question of how do we proceed into the future with leadership succession. Pinchas strives for purity and receives a Brit Shalom, but is not selected to lead the Jewish people in his interactions with the inhabitants of the land. As Suzanne read Torah this morning, she chanted these words, Vayivkod Adonai Elohei haruchot v'chol hapasar ish al ha'edah, source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community. Dr. Debbie Weissman, in a recent Devar Torah for Rabbis for Human Rights, mentions the Rashi on this text. Adonai Elohei Haruchot, source of the breath of all flesh, can also be read as God of the many spirits. Lord of the universe, writes Rashi, the personality of each person is revealed to you, and no two are alike. Appoint over them a leader who will tolerate each person according to their individual character. The Midrash reads, the law is, if one sees many thousands of people, one should say, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, wise one who knows secrets. Just as their faces are different from one another's, so too their understandings are different, for each one has a different understanding. And so Moses requested from God when he died. He said, Master of the universe, each person's thoughts are known and revealed before you, and none of your children's thoughts are similar to another's. When I die, appoint a leader who can sustain them all according to their own understanding. Dr. Weissman asks us to pay attention to the word tolerate. Appoint over them a leader who will tolerate each person. Sovel in Hebrew, to tolerate, also means to suffer. It is a recognition that sometimes toleration of different opinions is difficult, is suffering, is something we have to stretch to do, something our government and the church should have stretched to do. While I am sad over the destruction of places of worship, the places suffering congregants would have liked to go to find solace and understanding, to process the news of the day. While I cannot imagine seeing our entryway or the places of worship I hold dear painted with red, while I am saddened because as an American Jew, I see this country of Canada as a beacon to the world of openness in its attempts to destroy oppression today. I also feel penetrated by a sword, with each story told and each body found. And it complicates the steps that I take on this land, in this country. In that 1850s North American Jewish newspaper, where the words of Isaac Mayer Wise were published, are found a celebration to the resistance of Christian missionaries by the Iroquois. The editor raises up for its Jewish readers an article on how the Iroquois cling to ancient customs with a tenacity betokening love and attachment, as an example of how to successfully resist assimilation here in North America. 1850, 34 years before residential schools were built by the Canadian government, the Roman Catholic Church, Anglican, Methodist, Presbyterian, and United Churches, to put this resistance to an end. It is traditional to end with a nechemta, with words of consolation. So I'll return to the fact that our text states that the zealot Pinchas is rewarded with a brit shalom. If you were to look in the Sefer Torah, which Ava read from moments ago, the word shalom there is written differently than other places it appears. The vav is smaller. The tradition being that peace is not real, is not complete when it is achieved through violence. There's a tradition that this Brit Shalom was not a reward, but a correction, that God changes Pinchas. He was a zealot because he couldn't see the whole picture, only one narrative, one side, which he took to be correct to the extreme. So God gives him a brit, not so much of shalom, of peace, but of shalem, shlemut, wholeness. It is a different kind of covenant of peace. He was given, and so may we all be given, the gift to see a picture so complex that it stops us from jumping to action. May we all receive a brit shalem, a picture that is complicated, granting us and the world a more abiding and secure peace. Shabbat shalom.